Hello and welcome to Soonicorns Summit powered by AWS. I'm Meloni Bhatt. From 416 startups in 2016 to nearly 73,000 registered entities today, the Indian startup ecosystem is on fire. Now, over 50% of these startups are from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, according to the Union Ministry of Commerce and Industry. On average, 80 startups are being registered daily, and the aim, according to the government, is to build a stronger ecosystem that nurtures India's startup culture to drive economic growth, support entrepreneurship, and enable large-scale employment opportunities. It is a work in progress, and the road to accelerated growth is long and hard, which will include improving infrastructure, human capital, driving economic reforms, and the ease of doing business. But there are facilitators that are helping and powering the system, and I have with me one such. Kumara Raghavan, India Head, Startup Segment AWS, to speak to us on how AWS is actually doing this. Kumara, welcome to Soonicorns Summit.
Thank you, Meloni.
All right, so during the pandemic, businesses were forced to digitize. Many migrated from on-premise computing to cloud. Now, many realize that cloud, of course, leads to nimbleness, flexibility, scalability. Can you give us a sense that from pre-pandemic and now, how have things changed in the way companies are approaching and leveraging their businesses on cloud?
Sure, I think pandemic was quite life-changing for all of us in multiple ways. But I think one of the biggest changes was the behaviors and habits that all of us had inculcated over the years. So everyone turned to digital avenues to meet their daily buying needs for groceries, for example, or even their educational needs for themselves and for their children and so on. So what all of this meant was a very, very rapid adoption of digital services as the default. So what this really made businesses do is to shift from on-premises computing to cloud computing so that it could support their fast-fueled technology-driven growth that they were all seeing from their consumers. Now, this came from across all segments, whether it was enterprises or MSMEs. And cloud computing has been a big contributor to this rapid pace of digitization globally. And in the last 2 years particularly, so the everyday benefits that the technology offers is something that is constantly seen in the shift that we continue to see. So if you look at the market projections by IDC, they peg India's public cloud services market to reach 13.5 billion by 2020. 13.5 billion by 2026. And that would make India among the fastest growing markets for public cloud service as a whole. Now, startups have played a big role really in the adoption of cloud services. And when you look at our customers and why they go on to cloud, there are a number of reasons. You touched on some of them, Meloni. Most often it starts with cost. So everyone wants to reduce their costs, and cloud is a good way to go about that. But the other advantage really is in the kind of agility that cloud provides. So when you're looking at spinning up multiple experiments and trying out new experiments that you want to see if you can fail or succeed on, so you can spin up a number of instances. If those experiments fail, you can quickly shut down those instances, or the ones that succeed. If they need to scale, it can scale very rapidly. So that's the kind of agility and even the level of innovation that a cloud can provide. But yet another advantage is really around the scalability. Now, let's say you're in the business where you have seasonality of demand and you have peaks during, let's say, a festival season. So you can have a peak consumption period where you can have multiple instances running and catering to your needs. And then you can quickly bring that scale down once that peak event is over. So we see businesses really using AWS Cloud to reduce their technical debt and continue doing these experiments as a way to cater to their customers' constantly growing needs.
Yeah. Kumara, can you give us a sense of, whether the adoption of the cloud pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and now, has it become more intense? And are they doing more on the cloud than they were doing before? And, what has been the level of the intensity and, the change in their approach when it comes to cloud, if there's been one?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think there's been two shifts. One, we touched on the rapid adoption of cloud and how the market
Yeah.
is really growing for cloud services. But the other phenomenon that we see is the wider adoption of the range of services. So it's not just the basic services around the compute or storage that's being used by all of the companies, including startups. A lot of them are also delving into the innovative parts of the technology. So whether it is on AI and ML or IoT or even databases, when you look at databases, traditionally most organizations were built around databases which were very structured, and they were often relying on standard commercial grade databases. But that's constantly evolving as well. Today, there is a wider adoption of non-SQL databases, and there are very specific task-based databases or purpose-built databases, as we call them. So including for areas like graph or time series, or even distributed ledger databases. The other phenomenon that we see is a growing adoption of container services. So including our Elastic Kubernetes service, or EKS as we call them. So today, when you look at the container services deployment in the cloud, so over 2/3 of the container deployments in the cloud is on AWS. And the other thing we see is when you look at early stage startups, they like working with Amazon Lightsail, which is ideal for simpler workloads, for very quick deployments, and for getting quickly started on AWS. So that's designed to help you start small and then scale as you keep growing. So essentially what our advanced services does is to take care of the heavy lifting that an organization typically has to do on the IT and the infrastructure side. And so that the startups can focus on building the scale or building the product that they're really good at. So it takes away all of that undifferentiated heavy lifting and lets them focus on the crucial problem that they want to solve.
How is the Indian market different? If you could give us a sense from the international market when it comes to these adoption of these range of services. Is there a particular service at AWS, where you see Indian startups leveraging heavily?
So when you look at the kind of services, we see startups using pretty much the entire depth and breadth of services that we have to offer.
All right.
So it doesn't matter what a startup has to do. We have the tools and applications to enable them to do it. We have over 200 products and services, and we have the whole breadth and depth of capabilities that any cloud provider can offer. And that ranges, as we covered, from basic compute and storage all the way to advanced databases or other architectural options, including the pre-built solutions. So essentially, one of the things that we have tried to make sure is that even a non-technical founder has it easy to adopt cloud and get going for all the things that they want to.
Okay. Businesses, of course, as you mentioned, they're recognizing the significance of digital technology, in the aftermath of the pandemic. And a lot of them are investing or attempting to invest in AI and ML. You have, lots of products. Can you give us a sense of what the offtake has been of these products? And, any particular sector or segment or industry where you're seeing perhaps an unexpected interest in AI and ML?
Sure. Look, at AWS, we are quite enthusiastic about machine learning technology, and our startup customers are too. So India is obviously a very growing economy, and we see the scope for AI and ML becoming very broad. So initially, it was used as a mechanism for bringing in efficiency, but now you see a huge amount of innovation happening in this area as well. So the way we look at AI and ML is in 3 layers. So at the first layer, what we look at is the basic infrastructures that goes into building an AI ML capability, whether it is GPUs or even standard frameworks like MXNet, for example. So we have standardized versions of these, and these are available for organizations with deep technology skills who have their own ML specialist developers and who have data scientists, for example. So they like to build and train their own models. And so we have this first layer of technology that's available for them. The second layer of technology that we have is what we call as the Amazon SageMaker. And that's a fully managed ML service. And that helps data scientists and developers prepare, build, train, and deploy high-quality ML models by bringing together a broad set of capabilities, which is very, very purpose-built for AM, for machine learning. And the third layer that we have is what you can loosely call as the cognitive services, so essentially mimicking a very human experience. And there we have a set of ready-made offerings. So offerings like TextRact, which can extract text from various material and read through images and several layers of text, for example, or recognition. So which again allows for quick recognition from video and other images. So all of these are ready-made services that startups can incorporate into their applications very quickly. So that's how we have structured our offerings. And to answer your second part of the question in terms of the kind of use cases that we see, I think what we have seen is post-pandemic, there's a significant momentum in adopting AI/ML across verticals, whether it is healthcare, whether it is gaming, edtech, or fintech. So to take a few examples, one of our customers, Healthify Me, and they are offering a new service called the Healthify Pro. And this is a very advanced, personalized metabolic health program. So what they are able to do with Healthify Pro is do virtual continuous glucose monitoring. So that effectively helps predict the glucose values without having a physical device attached to the individual. And they are able to do this using the Amazon SageMaker, and they have built their own machine learning models for this prediction. So the Amazon SageMaker helps build, train, and deploy these models for this use case. And they don't have to have a fully managed infrastructure. So all of that is taken care of by the Amazon SageMaker side of things. So another example in the gaming side is Games 24/7. So they're India's leading gaming company. And they have a portfolio that spans skill games and also casual games. And when you look at their vast user base, they have two different kind of use cases which they like to solve. One is they want to ensure that there is no fraud. So for example, if there are 4 players playing, they don't want 2 players to collude and cheat out the other 2 players. So they use the graph database called Neptune to ensure that all of that is weeded out. The other thing that they're able to do is to use the Amazon Personalize so that each of their consumers gets a very personalized experience. So that's on the gaming side of things as an example. And the other one that we are particularly proud of is in the edtech space called vShine Tech. And when the pandemic came about, one of the things they did was to focus on the university examination process and bring a level of automation and facial recognition using the Amazon recognition. So this aided proctoring, and they did this within a week's time. So that's how rapidly they were able to bring out this offering and deploy it in quick time. And the last one I'll touch upon is Perfios. They are a fintech startup, and they use Amazon TextRact. So they use that to extract text from handwriting or even data from scanned documents. And they process as many as 2 million financial documents every month. So you can see a very wide range of use cases for AI and ML that's happening today. And I think we are very much at the beginning of this phase of usage. There's a whole lot of innovation that's waiting to be done. And we see startups readily jumping into that space and bringing more and more advancements that really make our lives more easier as we go by.
Any particular spaces, any particular industry or segments that you're excited about?
No, look, I did touch about a number of them.
Yeah.
So these use cases going across all of the segments. So today, when you look at the kind of investments that come into the startup segment in India, fintech by far takes some of the highest degree of investment, followed by the software as a service companies. So those two by far are the largest areas of innovation within India today. And that's where you see the investments come in. And there again, you see an incredible amount of innovation which is happening using AI/ML. We touched on Perfios from the fintech side of things.
Yeah.
And if you take SaaS, for example, take Freshworks, one of our biggest poster childs when it comes to SaaS success stories in India. They use as many as 30,000 SageMaker models. And they have brought down what used to take over 7 hours into less than 30 minutes when it comes to supporting their customers. So that's the kind of innovation that we are looking at across the segments.
Yeah, and of course, it brings into focus the agility, and then from the agility, the ability to drive scale for the companies that are innovating with AI and ML. I want to touch upon the India story now, Kumara. With digitization, cities and metros are no longer these focal points or epicenters of growth. There was recent data that came out, I think, over the last few days, where the government actually said that over 50% of the startups are from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and they're propelling growth. So there are other trends as well, right, which we've seen through the pandemic, say work from home, for instance, the gig economy is somehow getting more involved when it comes to work. How are you viewing these trends? And in the backdrop, beyond creating demand for services and products, how do you see these tier 2, tier 3 cities and the innovations coming out of them really powering India's economic progress?
Oh, look, India is definitely undergoing a very steady but very unique trend, which is that experienced professionals and startup founders are moving from metros to the tier 2 cities. And you see a lot of innovation coming from these tier 2 cities as well. So they are across artificial intelligence, across climate technologies, across IoT. You can pretty much name any innovation and any current trend that's happening in the industry, and that's happening in the tier 2 cities as well. So previously, Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, NCR used to take the limelight when it came to the startup ecosystem in India. But tier 2 cities are rapidly emerging as a source of innovation. So I think there was a recent news report which highlighted that over 50% of the Indian startups are based in non-metro cities, which is incredible. So the growth of startups and startup initiatives in these small towns in India are not only proving to be effective for the startup founders and entrepreneurs, but these cities themselves are reaping the significant benefits due to the advancements taking place in these cities. So there's clearly a very strong momentum in the startup ecosystem from the tier 2 cities. And we are engaged with the founders to ensure that they have the resources to build their business with full access to the length and breadth of AWS services.
There is another segment often that comes up when we speak of access to technology, access to funding, and that segment is of women, right? In India, women only have about constitute about 14% of entrepreneurs. And perhaps in the case of startups, that number is even smaller. You have a program called Techcelerate, which is in collaboration with the Indian Women's Institutional League. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact that it's had so far, and what are your plans ahead with it?
Oh, you're right, Melanie. I think one of the things that we are particularly sensitive about is the fact that we have half the population in this country that's not participating fully in all the innovation that's taking place. And that would be a big, big miss for all of us and the society at large if we don't facilitate that innovation to come to the fore. So at AWS, we definitely believe that our future is inclusive, diverse, and equitable across race, gender, belief, origin, and community. So our culture is defined by our leadership principles, our newest leadership principle being success and scale bring broad responsibility. So let me say that again, success and scale bring broad responsibility. And this really reminds us that we must support our customers, partners, local communities, and the world at large to do better and be better. So as a part of this, we do a number of initiatives, and one of them is what you touched on, the Techcelerate. So we began this in December 21. It was a 4-week virtual program run by our AWS ID&E team and the Indian Women Institutional League. So what this did was to have 120 selected startups get access to resources ranging from technology in the form of the AWS credits, the training piece, and they were also mentored with master classes which ranged across topics of technology, across product, across funding. And this was done by industry leaders, successful startup founders, venture capitalists, and even AWS experts. Other than that, what we also did was we partnered with Ncubate and TIE Delhi to create an in-person social mixer for women founders and funders in Bangalore and Delhi. So this generated a lot of interest as well. We had over 180 women who joined these mixers to learn, share, and collaborate with each other. So that was, again, essentially something that was great to see. We also have the AWS Startup Mentorship Program, and this offers expert mentors who can guide entrepreneurs through the key challenges that they face through every phase of their growth, from the initial ideation phase to the scale stage, to the growth stage, and to the scale stage. And we help them with not just the technology aspect of things, but also with network and also in terms of the business advice. So with a focus on supporting women and underrepresented minority entrepreneurs, this program has mentored more than 1,000 startups since its launch in 2019 June.
All right. You know, see, right now there is a tech winter, right? There is a lot of focus on corporate governance, the fact that startups need to become profitable. Uh, can you tell me, what are your thoughts? We have the Soonicorns Summit, and especially it is a platform to speak of the strengths that Soonicorns and unicorns bring to India, and the way that they help drive growth and hopefully drive employability as well. But what are your thoughts on the initiatives like this summit to evangelize, to educate early on the playbooks of building businesses the right way? And what are the initiatives that AWS has planned in addition to your sector specialist programs, some of which you touched upon?
Sure. No, look, firstly, I think this is an incredible initiative. I think one of the big benefits that we have seen over the years now is our startup ecosystem has definitely matured. And a sign of that maturity is events like these. So what really happens is you have second time, third time, fourth time entrepreneurs who are coming in and are supporting newer startups. And that does two things. One, of course, it compresses that whole product market fit, the time that it takes to develop that product market fit. And the second is it improves their chances of success with better connections and better advice that some of these founders didn't get in their initial phases of the journey. So I think that's definitely a great sign of maturity of the whole ecosystem. And I think it's events like these that power it and make it even better for startups who are beginning their journey early on. So at AWS, we have been supporting startups since our inception in 2006. We have had a number of startups who have come through that journey, both across the world and in India. When you think of companies like Oyo or Freshworks. So all of these began their journey at AWS. So what we try and do is we ensure that we are with startups through every phase of their journey. So when you're at the very early stages of your journey, so the AWS Activate program is the gateway for startups to join the AWS program. So it offers credits and takes away one of the big spends that a startup can have, which is their cloud spend. So that takes it off their spend early on in their initial stage. But that's not the only thing. What they also get to do with Activate is they get a lot of training content. They also get technology advice on which offerings to choose from our whole Activate console. So our Activate console, even for non-tech founders, gives ready-made templates through a build on AWS offering, which essentially puts together a combination of repository, which essentially ensures that if there is common undifferentiated solutions that a startup wants, they can take that off and run that, and then focus very much on the problem that they are trying to solve. Now, as a startup keeps growing through the stages, they obviously have the access to the wide range of technology from our 200 services that we have, and that ensures that as they keep refining their offering, so they have the latest tools and technologies to help them innovate and bring that differentiation that they want to for their set of consumers. And then finally, as the startup keeps growing and scaling, they want global access. They want to get better networked. And that's again a program that we facilitate through our connections program for our startups. The other thing that we do is we work with our ecosystem partners that ranges across VCs, across angel investors, other founders and mentors. So all of this gives startups a very real world experiences of the challenges that they can face every day. So we also have a very extensive technical team with very, very region specific knowledge and also domain expertise. So whether you're looking at fintechs or healthcare, these are all highly regulated industries. So our experts can help them navigate not just the technology piece of it, but also the regulatory side of things. So they can do all this at scale. So essentially with looking at each stage of their growth, we try to stay in tune with the needs of a startup and make sure that they are empowered for success as much as they can be.
Right. Well, I have the last sets of, I have two last questions for you. So first one is about tech for good, right? So tech is regarded as the key that will solve so many of our problems, be it the climate emergency, be it pandemic. But what's also happened is that, tech can also exacerbate inequalities. Like, for instance, we saw during the pandemic that a third of the world's children missed out on remote learning. So what it did is it exposed the digital divide. Uh, there's also this issue of good governance when it comes to startups. There have been a lot of newspaper reports recently about corporate governance, about the need for good governance, especially in the startup ecosystem. So these two things. A, how do we drive tech for good, especially in India? And it's not just about the profit. The second part is also how do we instill this entire bring in more corporate governance and corporate responsibility, especially for businesses that are starting up. How do you make it one of the pillars for success when it comes to this?
Sure. So firstly, I think at AWS, we are really committed to investing in India and putting the power of AWS cloud directly into the hands of the customers and partners. So what that does is they have the tools to build a better world, deliver citizen impact at scale, and reinvent technology experiences. Now, I know you mentioned a couple of instances, but when I look back at things that we saw from our vantage point, so again, to dwell on Healthify Me, so a startup. So what they did during COVID-19 was when vaccinations were first being made available for the public. If you recall, it was all done through smartphone booking. And now, obviously, a vast majority of our population uses feature phones and they don't have smartphones. So what Healthify Me did was to come up with Vaccinate Me. So it was an application which enabled people to get notifications of vaccine availability on their feature phones. And they could book vaccine slots. And this was made available in 10 different languages. This was launched in 2 weeks as soon as the Indian government announced vaccine registrations to the public. So you can definitely put technology for good. You can definitely make it far more accessible than was traditionally imagined to be. And you can even reach parts of the country and the population that is not necessarily fully tech enabled. So this reached over 15 million people across 700 districts. So it helped them search for vaccination slots nearby and receive notifications as they became available. So that's definitely one. And the other, when you look at the related aspect, is around sustainability. So obviously, businesses have realized that making the switch to sustainable business practices provides an opportunity in itself for new and innovative ideas. So the call for private and public sectors to collaborate on sustainable innovation is quite strong. And cloud technology usage is one path to achieve this. So at AWS, we traditionally use what we call as the well-architected review. So traditionally, our solution architects go and work with startups, enterprises, and MSMEs to review their architecture for different aspects, whether it comes to cost or efficiency, performance, and so on. What we did was to add a sixth pillar, which was around sustainability. So this pillar essentially reviews the architecture from a sustainability pillar and says that, for example, if you're catering to video as a service for your consumers, do they need a certain level of latency or can they live with something else? And in turn, what optimization does that bring in technology and in turn, the usage of the resources at the back end. So that's definitely an aspect and there's a growing awareness of it. So again, to pick another example, we have a startup called We Got Utility Solutions. They're a startup based out of Chennai. And they developed a cloud-enabled water management platform on AWS. And they do that using IoT-based ultrasonic water sensors. So this platform provides the ability to monitor water usage at a very granular level. And so then they can detect leaks remotely, and then they can generate usage analytics and detailed reports so that you can determine the optimum water consumption patterns in a residential complex or in commercial buildings and so on. So over the last 5 years, We Got Utility Solutions scaled operations, and they now process over 12 million data ingestion points across over 50,000 sensors that they use on AWS. So you can definitely put technology to good, and I think we'll see more and more of this innovation happening all the time. And even for areas where technology was not previously accessible, I think they'll feel the impact of it one way or the other in the time to come. I definitely see that as a growing trend. And coming to your second part of it, I think it goes back to touching on the maturity of the ecosystem. I think we are a very, very rapidly evolving startup ecosystem. And what you see is the lessons being learned over the years from the early stage startups who began their journey and being passed on to the new stage startups that are coming in is definitely accelerating. And I think it's only a matter of time that we get better and better at this whole governance aspect as well.
Kumara Raghavan, India Head, Startup Segment AWS. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Melanie.